Part 47. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 461. Among the three people who were burned, Big Beard was the most seriously injured. However, the fire was ignited from the hem of his robe, and Su Ming extinguished it when it reached his buttocks. Therefore, Big Beard and Zhao Yun's hair were fine, except for Su Ming was unlucky. The round-neck t-shirt he was wearing was worn. In the blink of an eye, most of his eyebrows and hair were burned off. His hairstyle was unattractive, so he had to make the mistake and shave his head. The stewardess was very good at her skills and quickly shaved off half of his hair. She actually took out a small eyebrow trimmer and shaved Su Ming's eyebrows with a smile. About 1/3 of Su Ming's left eyebrow was also burned off. It was either shaved into the long, ghostly broad bean eyebrows like Japanese women's, or shaved completely. Su Ming chose to shave his head. It was hot in Iraq and he had no hair on his body, so it was actually cooler. Seeing the sharp eyebrow trimming knife, Su Ming rolled his eyes speechlessly. The security check on this plane must have been a failure. First it was the flammable thing with the big beard, and now it's the stewardess knife. Any dangerous object can be thrown at her. Take it with you on the plane. No wonder planes flying to Arabia often encounter hijackers who throw bombs. Sir, your reaction was so quick just now, the flight attendant said with admiration while shaving Su Ming's eyebrows. You took off all your clothes the moment it caught fire. Except for the hair, there was almost no injury on the skin. It looked like it seems that he has received professional training. The stewardess was quite grateful to Su Ming. If Su Ming hadn't come forward just now, there would definitely have been a huge accident on the plane today. Although the current accident is not a small one, fortunately not many passengers were injured and the situation is under control. Su Ming chuckled and was embarrassed to answer. She had just taken off her clothes to put out the fire, and the stewardess was right in front of her. She could see everything about her body clearly. She was looking at her strangely now. *U0026 #U0026 the bearded man suddenly shouted again, looking excited. What on earth is this person doing? He wasn't burned by fire, why is he still so energetic? Su Ming asked Zhao Yun with a straight face, not daring to move the skin on his face for fear of being disfigured by the knife in the stewardess's hand. Zhao Yun translated and said, he seemed to be able to understand Chinese, and said that you are not quick to react, but are the messenger of the god of fire, so you are not afraid of fire. When the bearded man saw someone translating, he had a holy expression on his face and made wild gestures with his hands, explaining something to Su Ming in excitement. He said that the Zoroastrian sacred text Avesta mentioned that when the world progresses to 9,000 years, the demons created by the evil Ahriman will run rampant in the world until the apostle of the fire god Chasian in the holy Casa Yahudi wakes up after 3,000 years of slumber, with a divine body that cannot be burned by fire, letting the flames falling from the sky burn throughout the world. The souls of good people pass through the sea of fire as lightly as walking in lukewarm milk, and the souls of evil people pass through the sea of fire. They will feel unforgettable pain, but their sins will be completely burned in the fire, and finally the evil spirits and evil creations created by Ahriman will be destroyed. The bearded man was talking nonsense, and the stewardess and Su Ming just listened to it as a story. Anyway, the religious legends are all the same. There must be a good god and a bad god of similar strength. The bad god wants to destroy the world, and the good god protects the world. Usually the bad gods are slightly weaker than the good gods, but they are very cunning and insidious. When the good gods are not paying attention, they come up with a big conspiracy. Then the good gods create many subordinates who are only slightly weaker than him, such as archangels. 10 The Urgenexion and the 8 heavenly dragons fought on his behalf against the bad gods. Oh, I understand, Nangong Huang interrupted at the side, pointed at Su Ming with a smile and said, brother-in-law, you are the apostle of the god of fire, Shaxian, that he mentioned. That's what he meant, Zhao Yun said with a smile. The stewardess was also smiling with her lips pursed. None of them took the bearded man's words seriously. A religious fanatic could say anything. Su Ming's head was filled with depression. Damn it, I've become the spokesperson of Mazda. Why don't you give me the endorsement of Mercedes-Benz and Audi? Mazda, the more it becomes more low-end, it's not as good as a Jeep. I'll be satisfied, Zhao Yun said with a smile. It's a good thing I didn't let you be the spokesperson of the circus. Su Ming was just in the aisle of the cabin, his body was on fire and he was jumping up and down. His movements were extremely agile. In the blink of an eye, he took off all his clothes that were on fire. To put it nicely, it looked like he had received professional training. In the eyes of ordinary people, it seems that it is just a juggling act. That is to say, Big Beard had the preconception that Su Ming was a fire that could not be burned. During the rest of the voyage, the bearded man was handcuffed for treatment. He kept shouting about legends about fire gods, messengers, and demons. He struggled several times to kiss Su Ming's toes. Ming thought it was quite interesting at first, but after a while, he also got annoyed. It's like going to a mental hospital. Chatting with a mental patient. The first few sentences feel quite novel and fun, but if normal people and mental patients are locked up together and listen to his ramblings all the time, no one can stand it. The bearded man's name is Basil, which means brave man in the local language. Brave. Mad, self-immolation is brave? You might as well be called a reckless person. Even Nangong Huang, a half-year-old child, knows this truth. Su Ming had a headache when Basil said it, and frowned. Uncle Zhao, then asked him, what about Agassi, Asia? Oh, it's Shazia. Hasn't that guy been sleeping at the bottom of the lake for thousands of years? I am a person from the East, and I am not yet 25 years old. How can I explain this? After Zhao Yun translated, the bearded man babbled quickly. Zhao Yun said with a helpless smile, he said that the holy lake Kazaya is the back garden of Mazda's palace in the sky. The palace is floating in the sky. The lake of Kazaya is the position is not fixed, and the apostles can only truly become saints and return to their palace in heaven after awakening the power of ice springs and flames and completely destroying the devils. Therefore, the apostles walking in the world must not destroy all the devils before. Will not know his true identity. The power of ice spring, fire, why doesn't he talk about the song of ice and fire? Su Ming realized that he had made a big mistake. Can he reason with a psychopath? He didn't know anything about ice spring flames, but he had tried it. According to what he said, Dongguan was full of fire gods back then, and the government wiped out thousands of fire gods in 1 year. Well, to put it this way, party members are more powerful. I really followed the wrong boss. After that, the flight was uneventful, and the plane finally arrived over Baghdad. Looking from the window thousands of meters above the ground, this exotic ancient city is full of ruins and bombed-out buildings everywhere, and it is very desolate. The plane landed at Baghdad International Airport. As soon as the cabin opened, 2 heavily armed airport soldiers walked into the plane with guns in hand and escorted Basil off the plane on a stretcher. Basil turned around and yelled at Su Ming before leaving the cabin door. No need to translate, I know, call me Apostle, Su Ming said speechlessly. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 462. I thought you would take advantage of the situation and pretend to be that saint, Zhao Yun said with a smile. Although Zoroastrianism is a small sect, it has a deep foundation. More than 1,000 years ago, it was the state religion of the Persian Empire and was more powerful than Christianity. Although there are not many people who believe in Zoroastrianism in the Middle East now, those who can still maintain their faith after so many years are extremely loyal believers. No, I don't want to deal with foreign religions, Su Ming shrugged. Domestic religions and foreign religions, especially those in the Middle East, are too different. Domestic religions are just a product of maintaining social stability under the regime and do not have their own energy. Religions in the Middle East are still vaguely above the government. Many of them are simply holding guns in their hands, and their doctrines are higher than the law. It is better to offend the local government or even the warlords than to offend religion. Besides, the reason why I can resist fire is because of the energy storage ball, and it has nothing to do with their saint. It is fun to pretend today, but it will be exposed in the future. At that time, I will be hunted down by thousands of loyal believers like Basel who dare to self-immolate all over the world. Standing at the airport entrance, I saw that Baghdad International Airport was surrounded by layers of barbed wire. On the lawns around the airport, pairs of armed soldiers were seen dating. Oh no, it was teams of armed soldiers patrolling. The entire airport, except for the runway, was relatively flat. The surrounding lawns were full of big and small holes. During the years when the Americans dominated Iraq, Baghdad Airport was the most heavily defended and attacked place due to the transportation of troops and supplies. It is said that at the peak, 18 rockets were fired at the airport from outside in one day. This also shows how bad Iraq's economy is now. After so many years, there is no money to repair the holes on the airport ground. Will that guy be sentenced? Su Ming left the plane and pointed at Basel who was being escorted away by soldiers and asked Zhao Yun. Although Basel is a bit nervous, he is more like a man than the short guy who can only talk nonsense. Of course, Su Ming doesn't want to deal with Basel again. This guy is too dangerous. It shouldn't be. Most Muslims don't reject Zoroastrianism. Some even think that Mazda is one of the incarnations of God. There are still very few people as extreme as the mustache. Every family has its own problems. The Iraqi government has always been mainly trying to win over and protect this small sect with a long history. Fortunately, no one died. I guess they don't even need to pay compensation. They can just give their patriarch a lecture and take him back, Zhao Yun said. After getting off the plane, I went to the airport to exchange 1.6 million Iraqi dinars. This local currency has depreciated severely. The official price and the ratio of Chinese currency are 1:166. 1.6 million dinars require about 10,000 Chinese currency. The airport staff exchanged them directly for Su Ming and his friends, and only charged 6,000. The largest denomination of this thing is 25,000 yuan per piece. It can only be used as pocket money in Iraq. When staying in a hotel, you still need to use US dollars or Chinese currency to settle. After leaving the airport, the three of them took a yellow taxi and went straight to the local tourism management department. There will be an official who is responsible for contacting them, acting as a guide for the next visit, and handling various procedures for purchasing animals. The taxi drove into the city. This once glorious ancient city was full of traces of war along the way. The most common thing on the street was soldiers with live ammunition. Some soldiers looked like children, not fully developed, with a childish look on their faces, and looked younger than Nangong Huang. Taxi drivers all over the world are very talkative, and Baghdad is no exception. While driving the car very fast, swaying left and right to avoid the pits left by bombs on the ground, they chatted with Zhao Yun. After learning that the three guests were from China in the east, the driver immediately showed great envy. The Chinese in Iraq may not have the best living conditions, but they are definitely the safest. Every day, bombings happen in certain unspecified areas in Baghdad. The factions, government forces, rebels, the United Front, and the IS in the north are fighting each other. The Chinese government's attitude towards the outside world has resulted in no one being offended, so no faction has taken the initiative to attack the Chinese. As long as they don't go to crowded places, religious holy places, and areas where Shiites are concentrated, the Chinese are basically safe. He said he really wanted to live in China. He heard that there is no need to fight all day there are no guns, everyone believes in Marx, and dozens of races live together peacefully. Zhao Yun translated. I understand. My dad asked me to come here so that I could receive patriotic education. Nangong Wang's words are really not a joke. When he was in China, he always felt that this country was not good, and life was not satisfactory. But after a trip to a place like Iraq, compared with his peers on the street who had to pick up guns at the age of 12 or 13 and could be blown to pieces by bombs at any time, Nangong Wang's life in China is completely a paradise. Su Ming didn't say anything, thinking that he couldn't take you with him next time he went to Europe. The car drove very fast and soon arrived in front of a 3-story building in the eastern part of Baghdad. From the outside, it looked like a small hotel. There was an Iraqi flag hanging at the door. There were several holes on the flag, which were probably bullet holes. This shabby place is the Ministry of Tourism. It is a provincial and ministerial unit of a country. It looks not much different from the town government of Suntown. The biggest difference is that there is no security guard at the entrance of Suntown government. There are 2 soldiers with live ammunition standing on the left and right of the entrance of the tourism department. Seeing 3 yellow people with suitcases getting off the taxi and walking towards the Ministry of Tourism, the 2 soldiers blocked the entrance without thinking, looking up and saying nothing. Su Ming stuffed a dinar into each of them. The 2 soldiers looked down at the denomination of 10,000 on it, and immediately flashed to the sides like robots, without asking them what they were doing, and let them go directly. The person who received Su Ming and his friends was a middle-level official of the Ministry of Tourism. He had a separate office with an electric fan. After a brief conversation, the other party made a phone call and chattered a few words. He arranged for us to have an official from the Tourism Bureau, which is roughly equivalent to a deputy section level clerk in China, to lead us to buy animals in the next few days. However, we need to be responsible for the food, accommodation, and transportation of this guide, as the Tourism Bureau does not have funds for this, Zhao Yun said. Not long after, the door was pushed open, and a dark and thin little man walked in from outside. After entering, he did not even look at Su Ming and the others, but respectfully saluted the leader. It's him, Zhao Yun's voice suddenly changed. The little clerk had turned around and happened to meet Su Ming and the others. It was the guy who quarreled with Basil on the plane. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 463. The little thin man's famous name is Adnan, which is another trope name that often appears in games. He is a native of Baghdad and is a Kuyi in the Tourism Bureau. When translated, he is exactly what Zhao Yun said as a deputy section clerk. The official level is overwhelming. When entering the Tourist Bureau, Su Ming gave a bribe of 10,000 dinars to 2 soldiers at the door. Adnan was respectful in front of their leaders, but bossy in front of the 2 soldiers. Seeing Adnan, the 2 soldiers suddenly had very flattering smiles on their faces and brought 2 small flags over. Adnan spoke simple Chinese and asked Su Ming and others to put small flags on the car windows wherever they went in the future, so that the local government troops would not cause trouble. Once again, we got into a yellow taxi without air conditioning and arrived at our accommodation in Baghdad, the 5-star Hotel Babylon Warwick. The entire hotel is magnificent and has a completely different style from the nearby buildings. If you ignore the surrounding buildings, you will feel like you are in Dubai or Las Vegas. According to Adnan, the overall security level of Babylon Warwick is very high. It is not only equipped with local police forces, but also employs guards from internationally renowned security companies. These security guards are actually mercenaries. Their equipment and tactical literacy are very high, better than those of United Nations peacekeepers. The troops are not bad, and in the event of a firefight, no one except the employer will be given face. The combat effectiveness is quite scary, so most of the wealthy foreigners who come to Baghdad live here. Inside and outside the hotel, just one step away, it seems that there are two worlds. As soon as you step into the hotel, you have gone from a war-torn battlefield to an upper-class civilized society. The hotel charges are sky-high in the local area, with a standard room costing just over 1,000 Chinese dollars per day. But in a place like Iraq, where there are safety guarantees, complete living services, and even 2 swimming pools, Su Ming feels that it is quite cheap. Neither he nor Zhao Yun were used to sleeping in the same room with men. They had booked 3 rooms before, but due to Adnan's joining, another room was temporarily added. When he got the gold-plated room card, the slightly proud look on Adnan's face disappeared all of a sudden, and he waved his hands quickly, feeling flattered. "Sir, this is really too luxurious. I live here, just the small hotel opposite." "Okay Adnan, I don't want to open my eyes the next day and find that you were blown into a corpse, or..." Su Ming smiled, "being burned into a coke." Adnan heard that this was a mockery of the scene on the plane before, and he was not ashamed but proud. He grinned. In order to safeguard the glory of Allah, loyal believers are never afraid of fighting against the infidels. "I have to say, you guys Orientals are so generous. I have taken many tourists from other countries before, but this is the first time I have the opportunity to live in Babylonville. Let the waiter deliver our gifts and take us to the zoo early tomorrow morning." Su Ming took out a can of royal jelly from his travel bag and said to Adnan, "But before that, Adnan, you can show me around this hotel. There should be some animals here." "Of course. This is our specialty. Every high-end hotel will have some beasts and rare birds." "But Mr. Su, don't you want to buy them?" "Oh, that's a sky-high price, such as an adult tiger. If you go to the private zoo I introduced, I can help you bargain for about $3,000, while in a hotel, it may cost $70,000 or $80,000. Of course Su Ming didn't want to buy animals in the hotel. One of the 3 energy storage balls he reserved was used on the plane. In a place like Iraq, you may encounter danger at any time. An extra ball will provide you with extra security at critical moments. He wants to use it in the hotel among animals, choose a more practical function and restore it to full capacity." "Okay sir, please come with me. As far as I know, this hotel has a group of very interesting platypuses." In the detention room at Baghdad International Airport, Basel was locked in a large cage. There were several police and soldiers with live ammunition outside the iron fence. In addition, there is an old man. The old man's beard and hair were all white, and his face was covered with deep wrinkles. He nodded to the leading soldier and handed over a cloth bag. "Thank you very much for taking care of me." The soldier took the cloth bag and opened it. It was full of stacks of very old dinars in small denominations. After he counted the number, he said in a deep voice, "Okay, he can go." After simple procedures, the military police opened the cage. The old man greeted the 2 young people who came with him, carried the injured Basel out of the airport, and boarded a dilapidated minibus. After laying Basel's stretcher flat in the car, a young man got into the driver's seat, started the ignition, and the old minibus swayed toward the north of Baghdad. "My most respected high priest, my most beloved brother Allah, I offer you the blessing of the God of Fire. I know that my brothers from the same race will definitely come to rescue me." Basel said to the old man, "You are so impulsive. In order to redeem you, the tribe spent 500,000 dinars. That was the money originally used to buy spices. Without enough spices, we cannot communicate with the Vulcan at all." The old man was a little angry. "Explain." But Basel was a little excited. He supported himself with one hand, straightened up on the stretcher with all his strength, and exclaimed, "High Priest Ali, my brother, so you can receive the oracle from the God of Fire." The old man's expression dimmed slightly and he shook his head. "No, even with the help of spices, I haven't communicated with the Vulcan for decades. Then what should we do? Basil said. The Islamic State in the West requires our tribe to provide them with young labor. In fact, they want slaves. The Kurds in the south require us to support them and will only provide them if we no longer support the government forces. We help, but the government forces have always only given verbal help. Their focus has always been on preventing the Kurds, even more than preventing is. Oh, and there are those coalitions that say we do not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. Damn it, if you don't interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, why do they come to our motherland? When arguing with the little Adnan, Basil seemed clumsy and tongue-tied, but when analyzing the surrounding situation, he spoke clearly. Well, Basil, there's no point in complaining about this. The old man Ali held his hands on his chest and made a strange gesture. His tone was sad and pathos. Has the true God abandoned our tribe, and even the last few thousand of us must compromise with the devil in order to gain a chance to survive? No, I would rather die in battle than compromise like the devil. Basil waved his fist vigorously, which involved the wound on his stomach, and he grinned in pain. But the true God has not given us guidance for many years. Although I hope this is a test from the true God, it is too late. Now we need God's guidance more than ever, Ali said helplessly. Allah, have you forgotten my mission to the east this time? Basil suddenly said. The Holy Scripture says that 9,000 years later there will be saints from the Far East, purified in flames, immortalized in ice springs, and leading the people of Zoroastrianism to defeat demons. But Ali smiled bitterly. Did you really find the saint? I met a person, I can't be sure, but he looks very similar to the legend. Ali's eyes lit up. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 464. Ali is the oldest and most authoritative priest in the tribe. In fact, he is also the most powerful one in the tribe of more than 3,000 miles. Every year, he takes out a large part of the tribe's meager income to select outstanding young people in the tribe and go to all parts of the world to find apostles of the God of Fire according to the description of the scriptures. In fact, Ali knows better than anyone that finding the apostles of the God of Fire is just an excuse. The real purpose is to hope that these outstanding young people will have more contact with the outside world, bring back real knowledge for the backward and poor tribes, and help the tribes to grow and prosper better, or in other words, save them from the brink of extinction. Ali has never doubted the existence of God, nor has he doubted the existence of the apostles. However, Ali's understanding of God is much deeper than that of the lowest tribesman in the tribe. In his opinion, the apostle of the God of Fire is not necessarily a certain person. As long as he can help the tribe out of difficulties and promote the knowledge and ability of the doctrine, he is the apostle of the God of Fire. God is omnipotent and unpredictable, but he will not abandon his people. God has left his thoughts in the holy book Avesta in obscure language. What the priests need to do is to study the holy book constantly and understand what God's guidance means. Hearing Basil say this, Ali was slightly stunned and asked curiously, "Please explain it in more detail." Basil recounted his experience on the plain with great excitement, and deliberately described the scene of the young man from the east who was safe and sound after being set on fire. At that time, Su Ming's clothes and pants were all on fire. After he took off his clothes, he really looked like the description in the holy book, coming from the flames and burning all uncleanness. In the doctrine of ancient Zoroastrianism, hair and clothes are unclean things, but in the development of modern civilized society, it is impossible to shave all the hair on the bare buttocks, so many Zoroastrians subconsciously ignore this point. If Basil's words fall into the ears of a person from the civilized world who has no religious beliefs, it is estimated that he will just listen to it as an interesting story, and at most guess whether Su Ming is an acrobat. The trick of breathing fire from the mouth and burning the body with flames was already very mature hundreds of years ago. But Ali and his tribe were still very backward and superstitious after all. The entire tribe had been worshipping the god of fire for thousands of years and had a natural reverence for fire. Ali himself was the high priest. In fact, in terms of superstition and firm belief, he was deeper than any other tribe member. And now, the tribe is at the critical moment of life and death. According to the scriptures, the messenger of God will appear in the most dangerous time. All of this is exactly in line with it. As for the Orientals, this is even more like it. The Persian Empire and the Arab dynasty both made Zoroastrianism the state religion. Judging from the classics handed down from that time, several expeditions to the east seem to be related to the search for the temple of the true god Mazda. A drowning person would not let go even if he grabbed a straw, let alone a tribe that was about to face a disaster. Psychologically, Ali hoped more than anyone else that a real apostle of God would appear to save them at this time. Therefore, Basil's words immediately caused a huge wave in Ali's heart. Although his mind was shaken, Ali finally maintained the calmness of a wise old man and raised his own questions. But, it was just a small flame, maybe it was a coincidence. Even if it was not a coincidence, he only passed the test of the flame. How can the ice spring explain it? It's simple, we catch him and throw him into the spring water with ice cubes. If he doesn't die, it's true. Basil's method is simple and rough. He can set himself on fire because of a momentary anger, and he is even more ruthless when he attacks others. How can this be? If he is really an apostle of God, what you do is tantamount to blasphemy, Ali shouted in a low voice, and his eyebrows jumped twice in anger. Basil is good in everything, but he is too impulsive. What should I do, Ali? Please forgive my disrespect, but you have been unable to communicate with God for decades. Will there be changes in the last few months? Basil said. Ali did not feel disrespectful, but agreed with it. But he had a deeper faith in God, and firmly believed that the God of fire would not abandon his faithful believers. He took a deep breath, frowned and said, "You are right about one thing. We must find him. Do you know where he went?" Basil shook his head, "I don't know. I was taken to the airport security room. However, I remember there were 3 of them. In addition to him, there was a middle-aged man and a young man. The man's name, in Eastern pronunciation, was called Suman. They were going to Baghdad." Suman, Ali muttered to himself, repeating the name that was completely inaccurately pronounced several times, and finally made up his mind, after returning, immediately let the young people in the tribe go to Baghdad to find this person. At this time, Mr. Suman was wearing a pair of large flowered shorts, accompanied by Adela, strolling in the large garden behind the hotel. A bald head without eyebrows would attract a lot of attention wherever he went in China, but here, there were too many weirdos, and no one would pay attention to this. There is a huge garden behind the Babylon Warwick Hotel, with a large outdoor swimming pool in the middle. It was a hot day, and many hot foreign girls in bikinis were playing in the pool. Su Ming lost interest after watching for a while. Foreign girls can only be viewed from a distance, not up close. Their pores are frighteningly large, and their skin is not on the same level as that of Chinese girls. If you are used to the skin of Chinese girls, you will feel that foreign girls have a layer of sandpaper on their bodies, and many of them have a strange smell. Except for Eastern Europeans. The only ones worth seeing are 2 Eastern European women. Due to the climate, the girls there have both the hot bodies of Western women and the delicate skin of Eastern women. They are also passionate and actively throw Su Ming a flying kiss across the swimming pool. Then Su Ming walked towards the 2 of them, walked towards them, in the stunned eyes of the 2 long-legged white girls, he walked directly over, walked farther, and came to the fence beside the garden. On the grass inside the fence, there were several peacocks walking. Unexpectedly, this hotel not only raises animals, but also raises a lot of them, almost catching up with a small circus. In addition to the group of furry platypuses that Adela mentioned, There are also peacocks, monitor lizards, and even a hippopotamus. The hippopotamus lay in the big pool, weak and powerless, and did not move when he saw someone coming. Su Ming used his mental power to communicate with it for a while, and the hippopotamus opened its big mouth with an ah, revealing its big yellow teeth, and looked at Su Ming pitifully. There was a tooth in its mouth, which was broken from the middle, leaving only half of it, which was blown off in the war. The hippopotamus without teeth was very unhappy, and was listless all day long, eating and waiting to die. Although it relied on the remaining half of the tooth, it could still easily bite a crocodile to death. Next door is the platypus. This guy with a duck's mouth and a furry body, is not as cute as it looks on the surface. The sharp hooks on the heels can release a large amount of toxins in an instant. It is one of the killers in the wild and very dangerous. There were many animals. Su Ming walked around for a long time and finally chose one to replenish the energy storage ball. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 465. The next morning, Su Ming prepared to go to several zoos in Baghdad to purchase animals as planned. After breakfast, he and Zhao Yunan and Gong Huan came to the hotel lobby. Adnan had been waiting here for a long time. When he saw Su Ming coming out of the elevator, Adnan strode up to greet him enthusiastically, with a happy smile on his face. Adnan, if every Iraqi could smile like you, Baghdad would be heaven. Su Ming thought to himself, what good thing has happened to this guy? Why is he smiling so early in the morning? Oh, sir, I experienced the feeling of heaven last night. It turns out that sleeping can be so comfortable. The air conditioner has no noise at all, and pure hot water is available 24 hours a day. There is no need to worry about gunmen breaking in and killing them in bed. Unfortunately, when I thought of my 2 children still living in that small shabby house in southern Baghdad, my heart was filled with guilt for them, which kept me awake for a long time. Adnan's tone was full of aftertaste. Okay, Adnan, if this trip goes well, I will thank you in addition. You can bring your whole family here to stay for a few days. Su Ming patted Adnan's shoulder and smiled. For such a local snake, it is necessary to win him over. If he puts in a little more effort, he will save himself a lot of unnecessary trouble. Thank you very much, sir. Adnan bowed deeply to Su Ming with the most polite etiquette. Let's go. Su Ming looked at the row of wall clocks in the hall. It was already 8:30 in the morning in Baghdad. Adnan slightly stepped aside to make way, but did not lead the way. Instead, he said, Sir, you can see that Baghdad is not very safe. The hotel security department provides mercenary services and sells weapons. Do you want to go and have a look first? Even if you don't hire combatants, it's not bad to buy some weapons for self-defense. Su Ming also laughed. Adnan is a devout believer, a small civil servant who is good at scheming, and a petty citizen who is a bit mercenary. These roles are well combined in him. After getting along for a long time, he is very down to earth and not so annoying. Mercenaries, buying guns. If you say that this guy didn't take kickbacks, Su Ming would never believe it, but if the water is too clear, there will be no fish. As long as it is not exaggerated, Su Ming doesn't care about this little money. Let's go and have a look. It's not allowed to buy in China. It's not easy to go abroad. Let's have some fun, Zhao Yun said on the side. The security department of Babylon Warwick Hotel is mainly undertaken by foreign security companies, that is, the legendary mercenary company. Nangong Huang has a lot of online novels in his mind. When he mentions mercenaries, he thinks of Blackwater Company. In fact, the glory of Blackwater was more than 10 years ago. The company responsible for the security of Babylon Warwick is Moran International Security Group, a famous or the largest security company in Eastern Europe. The founder of the company is a senior official of the former Soviet Far East Group and the Soviet Secret Service Organization KGB. It is said that he had scooped a ladle from the same pot. The second floor of the hotel's annex building, A whole half floor is the security department, and it is also the location of Moran International's branch in Iraq. Adnan found a person who looked like a hotel lobby manager and said a few words. The man led the way and explained the purpose of the two Russian mercenaries at the entrance of the security department. "Oh, seeing Chinese people in this damn place, I have a very cordial feeling. Haha, let's go in." A Russian mercenary laughed and said. "Thank you." Suming nodded, said a Russian phrase he learned from a movie, and then walked into the security department. Not long after Suming and his team entered, the two mercenaries standing guard outside the door looked at his back and talked. Could it be this guy who fooled Ludmila? Who knows, there are many Orientals living in the hotel. Another mercenary who looked like a polar bear shrugged, but it's still very happy to see Ludmila's face. Can you imagine the scene at that time? There would be a man who ignored her seductive eyes and walked straight past her to care about an animal? Haha. If those people at the headquarters knew that Ludmila, the dangerous mother bear, would also be ignored by men one day. Speak softly, Ludmila's heart is not as big as her breasts. Be careful not to be heard, or you will be punished. To help the army attack the is country, another mercenary warned in a low voice. While the two were talking, Suming and his group had already walked into the security department under the leadership of the lobby manager. Half a floor has been renovated, with only two separate large rooms on both sides of the corridor. One side is the weapons storage area. Through the bulletproof glass, you can see that the weapons room of more than 200 square meters is full of various firearms and weapons. The other side should be used for office and rest. It is not like the small offices in domestic units, but a whole open area with a series of semi-open small spaces. People come and go in the office area. They all look like ordinary clerks wearing uniform shirts, but without exception, they all have armed slings on their shirts. Suming is very sure that if someone messes up here, the next second, these clerks will pull out their guns and shoot that person into a sieve. The lobby manager is familiar with the place and took Suming and the others to a small cubicle and said to the people in the cubicle, "Madam Supervisor, there are several guests who need some security services." In the compartment, there was a man in camouflage uniform, with his back to Suming and the others, sitting in a big rocking chair, his long legs resting on the table, playing with a big pistol that was bigger than Suming's hand. "Okay, I got it, you can go now, the account will be settled with the hotel." The man's legs swung, and the rocking chair turned around, revealing a standard Eastern European woman's face, with blonde hair, two blue eyes, and slightly high cheekbones that set off the clear lines of the whole face. The Iraqi director of Moran International was actually a woman. Suming and the woman were both stunned. "It's you." "You," the woman actually spoke Chinese. It was one of the two long-legged Eastern European hotties I saw in the swimming pool yesterday. Adnan asked curiously, "Do you know each other?" Of course, I was very impressed by this hairless Chinese man at the swimming pool yesterday. I don't know if it's because she's not very proficient in Chinese, the female manager's words sounded strange. She stood up and stretched out her hand to Suming. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Ludmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko, the director of Moran International Iraq branch, and the deputy general manager of security at Babylon Warwick Hotel." The other party shook hands gracefully, which made Suming embarrassed. Yesterday at the swimming pool, it was obviously him who stared at her first, but she didn't get angry, but she responded with a wink in an open manner. According to the normal routine, he should have gone up to flirt with her. But he went straight around and walked towards the peacock, leaving a lady aside. In social occasions, this is a rather impolite behavior. "Hello. My name is Suming, from China, and I'm the manager of the zoo." Suming quickly stretched out his hand to shake her hand. As soon as their hands touched, they felt a warm and soft feeling in their palms. As expected, I had never guessed before. The skin of Eastern European women can be compared with that of Southern Chinese women, and is very different from those rough-skinned Western women. Although this female supervisor is very skilled in playing with guns, she is probably from the military, but her hands are still very comfortable to touch. Oriental people's names are very simple, which is very good. If you think my name is too long, you can call me Ludmila. Ludmila's eyes suddenly flashed with an ambiguous light, and the corners of her mouth curled up, saying, "But my comrades prefer to call me by the nickname Mother Bear, and sometimes add some prefixes. For example, when I am in a good mood, it is Charming Mother Bear, and at some bad moments, it is Dangerous Mother Bear." Ah, Su Ming didn't quite understand what Ludmila meant by this, but he felt a sharp pain in his hand. Ludmila's gentle little hand suddenly exerted force, as if it turned into a hard iron clamp, and pinched Su Ming's hand fiercely. Ludmila's revenge was like a tornado, coming suddenly and violently. Her hands suddenly exerted force, and her gentle little hands suddenly turned into the claws of a mother bear. As expected of a woman with the nickname of a mother bear, Su Ming's body is now much stronger than an ordinary strong man after being doubly strengthened by mental power and Tai Sui water, and is not inferior to special forces at all. However, Ludmila suddenly exerted force, and Su Ming suddenly felt a piercing pain, and the palm bones rubbed violently, almost ready to crack at any time. These soldiers are indeed unreasonable people who lick blood on the edge of a knife. It's not a deep hatred. Su Ming is still a guest of the hotel, and this girl actually came to the dark. After she made such a fuss, Su Ming was in pain, but he was relieved. It's like there is a ghost under the bed. If she never crawls out, you have to be worried all the time, and you can't eat or sleep well. But if she crawls out one day, although you will be shocked, you can finally feel at ease. It was solid, but the pain was real. Ludmila was really ruthless. In the blink of an eye, beads of sweat appeared on Su Ming's forehead, the muscles on his face were twitching and squeezed together, and half of his body was numb, as if he had Parkinson's syndrome. In the big office, the clerks coming and going around had noticed this scene. Not only did no one step forward to stop it, but they stretched their necks and looked over here happily. It seemed that Ludmila was not doing this for the first time. The people in the security company were all watching the fun, waiting to see this unlucky Oriental man make a fool of himself. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 466. Ludmila suddenly attacked Su Ming, and the people who came with him wanted to help but couldn't. Being able to serve as the director of a security company in a war-torn place like Iraq, her personal combat ability is unquestionable. Now Su Ming and his people, even if tied together, may not be the opponent of this female soldier. Adnan didn't dare to offend a strong person like Ludmila. Zhao Yun smiled. He was the most mature one, knowing that Ludmila was just venting her anger, and she wouldn't really do anything to Su Ming. Who asked this kid to flirt with girls by the swimming pool yesterday? She took the initiative to offer herself, and you turned around and ran away. Isn't this playing a trick on her? Nangong Huang was still the one who protected Su Ming the most. He was about to take action as soon as he glared at her. Ludmila didn't even look at him, and casually shook the big pistol in her other hand, and then Nangong Huang looked up at the ceiling and pretended that he didn't see anything. This is the disadvantage of not bringing Su Ming. If Su Ming is here, even if Ludmila is holding a Gatling gun, Su Ming will dare to rush up, and his fighting power is definitely stronger than Ludmila. The stalemate lasted for about 3 or 4 seconds. Fortunately, it was just a trivial little thing after all. Ludmila didn't really want to do anything to Su Ming. The reason why she gave Su Ming a warning was not only to vent her anger for yesterday's trivial matter, but also because of her own personality. After staying in a place like Iraq for a long time, this Momay has a tendency to be violent. Roar, Ludmila, don't bully this little guy. Look, his face is pale. Poor Oriental, look, he is about to cry. Iraq is not a place for these pampered guys. The clerks around Ludmila who are familiar with her also began to make a fuss. In the mercenary world where the strong are respected, reason is never as important as strength. Rich people may get services, but only the strong can be respected. Seeing Su Ming slightly bowed, looking very embarrassed, Ludmila achieved her goal, smiled triumphantly, and was about to let go of his hand. Unfortunately, she was happy, but Su Ming was not. In order to make herself happy, Su Ming cured her and made her unhappy. This time in Iraq, there were not many other things, but two things were the most: royal jelly to replenish mental strength, and money. Ludmila wanted to pull her hand out now, but it was too late. The next second, Ludmila's face changed, and a sharp light flashed in her blue eyes, staring at Su Ming. Just now, this guy's hand was soft and powerless, but now it suddenly became hard, as if he had put on a rhino leather glove out of thin air. Not only did his hand become hard, but his strength was also terrifying. Ludmila's expression changed several times in an instant, and the smile on her face disappeared. Instead, it was unexpected, followed by surprise, and 2 seconds later, it turned into obvious pain. People who were close could even hear the sound of her gritting her teeth. In contrast, Su Ming straightened up, his expression became calmer, with a smile in his eyes, and he slowly said, "It's a great honor to meet you, Miss Ludmila. In addition, I want to apologize for my disrespect by the swimming pool yesterday. I really had other important things yesterday, but I have to say that you look very attractive in a swimsuit." With every word, Su Ming's hand strength increased. When he said the word attractive, Ludmila felt that her hand was held by a real polar bear. The severe pain made her unable to open her mouth to answer Su Ming's words. If she hadn't bitten her teeth tightly, she would definitely scream in pain. She was in so much pain that tears were about to fall, and she subconsciously wanted to pull her hand back, but the other party's hand was as solid as a rock and couldn't pull it back at all. If this continued, her right hand bone would be broken in an instant. As a mercenary, this was definitely an unacceptable and serious injury. Ludmila's left shoulder moved slightly. Before she could take out the gun, her right palm suddenly lightened, and the strong power of the polar bear suddenly disappeared. She had been trying to pull her hand back. Under inertia, she stepped back a few steps, knocked over the chair behind her, held the table, and looked at Su Ming in astonishment. "Oh, Miss Ludmila, did I hurt you?" Su Ming shook his hand and smiled. "I'm sorry, your strength is too great. If I don't use force, my hand might be broken." Su Ming's words were very polite. If you just listen to him, it seems that he is the one who suffers. But from the expressions and reactions of both sides, everyone present can see clearly that Ludmila suffered a big loss in this small confrontation that was not even a conflict. The mercenary clerks were a little dumbfounded. They did not expect such a result at all. They knew Ludmila's background better than Su Ming. This hot girl who looked like a swimsuit model was definitely one of the most fierce women in the Russian General Staff Intelligence Headquarters before she retired. She was responsible for protecting the female relatives of the head of state. In hand-to-hand combat, she could easily subdue several professionally trained men. At least in Moran Company, no man had ever heard of a man who could be absolutely sure to defeat her in a one-on-one fight. It was precisely because of her strong personal ability that Moran Company sent Ludmila to Iraq as a regional director despite her somewhat irritable, impulsive, and promiscuous personality. Only a sufficiently fierce director could suppress this group of fierce mercenaries. No one could have imagined that Ludmila would be easily defeated by this unremarkable, hairless Oriental guy. Could this person be the legendary Shaolin monk? No Chinese kung fu? It is very likely that even if an average person is bald, he would not shave his eyebrows, right? Nangong Huang laughed wildly. raised two middle fingers to the people from Moran Company present, and made an internationally accepted gesture. Are you stupid? Who is my brother-in-law? The inheritor of the mysterious Oriental martial arts, a master from the bamboo forest and sea of clouds. This guy directly copied the words of the Panda Man in the martial arts competition. Zhao Yun was slightly stunned, looking at Su Ming strangely, thinking that this kid is very hidden. Adnan's legs were almost weak with fear. This is Moran's territory. What if he bullies Moran's female supervisor and the other party turns hostile? If the Americans were better, they could solve the problem with money, but these Russian bears are completely crazy. Under the leadership of the tough president who came from the KGB, the soldiers of this country have never known what it means to be reasonable. Miss Ludmila, are you okay? Do you need to call a doctor? Su Ming asked tentatively. He was in so much pain just now that he couldn't stand it. The thought that came to his mind was the same as Ludmila's later: if this goes on, my palm will be broken. So without thinking much, he broke the light ball of Asian elephant power and the other light ball of hippopotamus skin absorbed from the hotel. If the alligator turtle shell is iron armor, then the hippopotamus skin is at least hard leather armor. No matter which one, it is not comparable to human hands. It was the first time that Su Ming used two light balls together. It was really a waste of talent to just use them for handshake. To be on the safe side, he didn't use his full strength yet. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 467. The most depressing person is Ludmila herself. The backstage of Moran International is the Russian government. Having experience as an agent in the General Staff, she is very clear about the true relationship between Russia and China. In the era of cold weapons, distant relations, and close attacks, with the rise of long-range strike weapons, on the contrary, Russia and China are implicitly a strategic alliance, and the upper levels will never allow fierce conflicts. What's more, Su Ming and his team are, after all, clients of her current employer, the Warwick Hotel, and currently clients of Moran International. So no matter how bad-tempered she is, no matter how violent she is, she can't really do anything to Su Ming. The little trick of shaking hands just now was just to make this handsome young man look ugly. Who knew that the other party was not as weak as he appeared, but almost crushed her hand. As for the Oriental mysterious martial arts, Ludmila didn't take it seriously at all. What are martial arts? It is martial arts that kill people. At this point, Chinese and Russian agents never believe that there are any civilian masters. What are you looking at? Go to work. Ludmila was dumbfounded and glared at the surrounding Moran Company employees fiercely. She puffed up her chest and stepped on high-top military boots and walked towards the weapons depot opposite. Come and see what weapons you need. Su Ming and Zhao Yun looked at each other, shook their heads at the same time, laughed, and followed closely. The most common weapons in the arsenal are semi-automatic rifles and pistols. There are rows of M16s, AKs, and ACRS. There is also a huge Gatling gun and several grenades in the display cabinet, but these are not for sale. Su Ming and the others could only buy semi-automatic rifles at most. This was because Iraq was currently at war. In another place and time, they did not have a gun license and could not even buy a military dagger. Although the rifle was very powerful, carrying it on the street was too eye-catching and could easily cause unnecessary trouble. In the end, Su Ming and others each chose a Colt .45 caliber automatic pistol. This classic gun has been in service for more than 70 years. It is easy to use and has small recoil. It is very suitable for novices. It has a very low failure rate. It can adapt to various environments such as wetlands and deserts and is very durable. Durability is extremely important in Iraq with its harsh natural environment. Nangong Huang insisted on choosing a Desert Eagle, but he refused to listen to Zhao Yun's advice. Su Ming laughed and asked Lyudmila to take him to the shooting room. Before the bullets were finished, Nangong Huang rubbed it. He came back with his wrists that were numb from the shock, and honestly took a cold. The power of the sand eagle is indeed huge, but the price is that the recoil is astonishing. Ordinary people cannot play it at all. Unless it is against someone's body face to face, it will be difficult to hit the target. You can't play this thing without strong wrist strength. Lyudmila sneered at Nangong Huang, turned to look at Su Ming, and asked strangely, but you should be able to control it, why not choose it? Under normal circumstances, I can solve problems with my bare hands. The gun is just in case. It doesn't matter what I use. Su Ming looked pretentious. Are you kidding? The light ball with the power of the Asian elephant can only last for a few minutes. The power is after the enthusiasm passed. He also couldn't play Desert Eagle. Pretending will be seen through by others. Damn, if you can't see through it, then you are really awesome. Come on, how could Ludmila know Su Ming's true situation? The strength Su Ming showed just now made this former female agent secretly frightened. Seeing Su Ming's calm expression, Ludmila couldn't help but feel more. I glanced at him a few times. 3 guns and some bullets were not expensive, and Su Ming was also planning to hire a few bodyguards. Unexpectedly, Ludmila heard that they were going to buy animals and actually volunteered herself. I also like animals very much, especially bears. Polar bears. As your bodyguard, it's like going to the zoo. By the way, Ludmila crossed her arms and said to Su Ming. What's the situation? She is a supervisor, not a grassroots soldier, so how can she take the initiative? This made Su Ming very confused. He discussed a few sentences with Zhao Yun in the local dialect of Yangchuan City. Zhao Yun smiled and said that these mercenaries all worship the strong. She had a crush on you yesterday, and maybe you have subdued her today. But I completely fell in love with you. Zhao Yun just stood and talked without hurting his back. Ludmila was not a masochist, so how could she fall in love with him after being taught a lesson by him? Liking animals might be one of the reasons, but from the look in her eyes, Su Ming always felt that this furry girl might want to take a chance to get back to where she was before. In any case, it is not a bad thing to have a strong female special forces soldier to follow, which is both eye-catching and safe. The money is not expensive, only $600 a day. At worst, after going to the zoo, I can absorb a few more energy balls and completely give up. Ludmila's thoughts. At 10:30 in the morning, the group finally left the hotel. Ludmila drove a scary armed off-road vehicle with the Russian flag and the logo of Moran Company, and drove all the way to the first zoo. Big Forest Zoo, with a very common name, is a small private zoo. There are many small-scale private zoos like this abroad. A few years ago, Ang Lee had a movie. The hero's family ran a zoo, and he took a large group of animals across the ocean and encountered a shipwreck. Oh, dear Mr. Adnan, you are here. The owner of the zoo, an old man in his 50s, guided Su Ming and the others into the zoo. In fact, there is no need for guidance. The big iron gate of the zoo has collapsed in an explosion, and even half of the wall has collapsed. From outside, you can roughly see everything in the zoo. In the 2-3-acre park, there are more than a dozen large iron cages piled under a big tree in the corner. The shade of the tree barely blocks the direct sunlight. Most of the cages are empty, and less than half of the cages have animals. Is this a hyena? Nangong Huang pointed to an animal that was not much bigger than a dog, with messy hair all over its body, and was so thin that even its ribs protruded, and asked in confusion. Su Ming recognized it at a glance. The hairy hyena is a jaguar. Not only was the jaguar deformed due to hunger, but the other animals in the cage were also in a mess. Several kangaroos were as thin as sticks and lay side by side in a row. The horns on the top of an antelope were missing. 2 baboons were bald all over. Like an old beggar, they squatted in the cage pitifully, staring at Su Ming with their eyes open. The most pitiful one was a lion. This guy was lying there, and there was no meat on his body. From the front, the big head blocked the whole body, and only the head could be seen, which looked very ridiculous. But if you look at it from the side, you won't be able to smile at all. The lion was so thin that only a skeleton was left, with a layer of skin tightly attached to the bones. One of its hind legs was still disabled, and the sole of its foot was broken. The wound was new, and even the broken part couldn't bleed. There was only a layer of pus, and a few flies were buzzing around the wound. The beasts rarely showed emotions in their eyes. The wolves, lions, tigers, and even the Yangtze alligators in the Yangchuan Zoo never showed a close expression even in front of Su Ming. At best, they were indifferent and not fierce. But now, even Nangong Huang could see that the lion's eyes clearly showed despair. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 468. Young people like Nangong Huang have a sense of justice in their bones. Although he is not a lover of animals, he can see that the animals he saw at the Yangchuan Zoo were all healthy, lively, and cute. At first glance, he saw the scene in front of him. Suddenly became furious, pulled out the cold pistol on his waist, and shouted at the zoo owner, "Old guy, you are too cruel, why do you torture them?" The zoo owner was so frightened that he quickly hid behind him and looked at Adnan with a puzzled expression. Adnan communicated with the other party in Arabic, while Ludmila pressed Nangong Wang's gun and said expressionlessly, "This place has not been open for half a year. He did not eat these animals, which is already very noble." The zoo owner's words were translated, and he said dejectedly, "This lion was the last animal I bought. At that time, it still weighed 210 kilograms. Now it may only have less than 100 kilograms left." He raised his head and looked at Su Ming, "Rich sir, these animals are my only remaining property. If you are willing, buy them all. At least I can give my children a bite to eat." He pointed to an igloo not far away. Behind the windows of the hut, several children's faces were revealed, looking here in horror with wide eyes. "Of course, my boss is here to buy animals, but there are many zoos in Baghdad. These animals of yours are almost dead. If you buy them back, you may lose money." Adnan has completely integrated into the role, and he called Su Ming, became my boss, and helped Su Ming negotiate for the price conscientiously. When Ludmila heard Adnan's words, she frowned in disgust and turned to look at Su Ming. Her lips moved but she didn't speak. After all, she was just a bodyguard. "You have to know, if my boss doesn't buy it, maybe within a week, these animals will starve to death, or be snatched by soldiers for food." Adnan continued to lower the boss's price. The boss had a grimace and struggled to talk to him. Adnan was explaining something. Ludmila snorted and said to herself, "The Yankees, the British, the Chinese, the Russians, everyone in the world wants to carve up Iraq's oil, but no one cares about the life and death of these ordinary people. This is damn politics, the dirtiest thing in the world." Su Ming knew that her words were actually meant for him. He smiled, shook his head and said, "Miss Ludmila, are you a little too sensitive? These words should not come from a person whose bounden duty is to kill. The mouth of a mercenary." "I am a mercenary, but I am a human being first," Ludmila said coldly, "and I must correct you. The mercenary's duty is not to kill, but to protect." Su Ming did not continue, but first used part of his mental power to cover the injured lion, and then waved to Adnan, "Adnan, for the sake of God, Allah, and the beautiful Miss Ludmila. For the sake of face, don't embarrass this poor boss anymore, just follow the price he said." Ludmila laughed at this not so funny joke, and finally stopped making a face. "But boss." Adnan wanted to say something more. If he didn't have to bargain, wouldn't his role be greatly reduced? "This is not okay, it will affect whether the boss's thank you will be generous in the future." "That's it, no need to say any more, Nangong Huang, first give the other party a sum of money and ask him to ensure that these animals can get food and medicine in the next few days." "Adnan, you do the follow-up work, and then let's go to the next zoo. After Su Ming finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. The zoo owner's price was already much lower than Su Ming expected. All 7 animals together only cost $10,000. It's almost half sale and half giveaway. If you go to a normal animal trade market, you can't even buy a healthy male lion with this amount of money. The subsequent packing and transportation work is Adnan's job. Ludmila followed from behind, nodded to Su Ming, and showed a rare friendly expression, but Su Ming stared at her face, suddenly shook his head and smiled, without saying anything, strode onto the armed off-road vehicle. What does he mean when he smiles like that? Lyudmila was ignored by Su Ming again. She was a little annoyed and asked Zhao Yun, who was walking aside. Zhao Yun shrugged and said, I told you, you can't hit me. Ah! Why should I hit you? Is he laughing at me? Ludmila was not stupid. From Su Ming's strange smile and Zhao Yun's words, she immediately guessed something. Tell the truth, Miss Ludmila, you. Zhao Yun thought about the words and finally said, you are really an innocent girl. After saying that, he strode onto the off-road vehicle. Innocent, this was the first time Ludmila heard someone use this word to describe herself. In their culture, innocence is a perfect compliment, but why do these 2 men smile so weirdly? It doesn't matter how old you are still naive. You are so naive. Nangong Huang walked past her with a look of disdain. In the next half of the afternoon, Su Ming and his team visited 3 private zoos in and around Baghdad. The conditions of these 3 zoos were similar to the first one. Most of the animals lacked food and water, and the zoo operations were unsustainable. There are many private zoos in the Middle East, not because Arabs have the awareness of protecting animals. On the contrary, in the doctrines of most Arab religions, animals are low-level creatures. However, there are many wealthy people in the Middle East who like to raise wild animals for fun. Therefore, in peacetime, animal trade in the Middle East is very common, which indirectly gave rise to a large number of private zoos. 85 animals of various kinds were ordered, including giraffes, ostriches, a group of platypuses, and a nest of cute mongooses. This creature, which looks very similar to pangolins, likes to eat snakes the most, especially venomous snakes. A little koala, hanging on Su Ming with its hands and feet, was a gift. It was originally a private pet of a zoo owner. After selling the animal, the owner and his family were ready to take the money and leave Iraq, so they simply gave this little guy to Su Ming. Boss, our next stop is the Baghdad National Zoo, Adnan introduced. The Baghdad National Zoo is Su Ming's biggest goal on this trip. Compared with those small private zoos, the number and variety of animals in the Baghdad Zoo are completely different. Hippos, elephants, rhinos, crocodiles, pythons, and other rare animals can be bought. As soon as the armed off-road vehicle entered the Baghdad Zoo, it saw 20 to 30 soldiers in government uniforms in the park, pointing guns at several zoo staff and shouting something. Damn it, they are going to take the rhinoceros from the zoo, Ludmila said with a gloomy face. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 469. What rhino? As soon as he heard that these soldiers were going to take away the rhinoceros, Su Ming immediately became anxious and asked Ludmila anxiously, what rhinoceros? Is it the most famous one, woo woo? Before he finished speaking, his mouth was blocked by a small paw. The koala crawled along Su Ming's clothes and onto his shoulders, scratching his face with a small paw. Su Ming picked up the fleshy skin at the back of the koala's neck, as if he were carrying a kitten. The koala's limbs were hanging down, and its 2 bright little eyes were looking at Su Ming. Don't make trouble. Su Ming threw the koala to Nangong Huang. Nangong Huang stretched out his hands and caught the little guy in the air. The little guy started crawling along his clothes again. Is it a great one-horned rhinoceros? Su Ming was finally able to finish the question. Among the many animals at the Baghdad Zoo, there are two star animals, the greater one-horned rhinoceros. The great one-horned rhinoceros is also called the Indian rhino. This rhinoceros has a super majestic appearance. There are wide folds on the shoulder blades, under the neck and at the joints of the limbs, making the body look like it is wearing an armor made of metal plates. It is very close to China. In the shape of ancient battle armor, the male has a thick, short, but very hard rhino horn in front of his nose, so people also call it the great one-horned rhino. The adult great one-horned rhinoceros is absolutely huge, weighing nearly 2 tons, and its shoulder height is higher than that of an adult. It is the second largest animal in Asia, only smaller than the Asian elephant. It is also second only to the African elephant and the African forest elephant in terms of size on land. Asian elephant, white rhinoceros, the fifth largest land animal in the world. The rhinoceros is quite unlucky. When it comes to fighting, few animals in the world can beat it. Even Asian and African elephants that are larger than it may not be the opponent of the rhinoceros in a real fight. They are run at a speed of 50 km per hour. A strong blow from a rhinoceros horn can cause an elephant to vomit 3 liters of blood. The common man is not guilty, but he is guilty of carrying the jade. The problem lies in the rhinoceros horn. The value of rhino horn in the international market is 5 to 10 times that of gold of the same weight. Although pufferfish toxin is valuable, it requires high-tech purification, but rhino horn does not have this problem. You can kill the rhinoceros with one shot and saw off the horn. Driven by huge profits, the numbers of all types of rhinos are decreasing rapidly. In the former rhino habitat, rhino carcasses with their horns cut off and collapsed on the roadside can often be seen. The two great one-horned rhinos in the Baghdad Zoo are also endangered animals, with only about 3,000 left in the world. Of course, white rhinos are more precious. The problem is that there is only one white rhino left in the world. It is protected by 4 heavily armed policemen in Kenya 24 hours a day. Su Ming will definitely not be able to get it. Of course they are the two great one-horned rhinos. There are only 2 rhinos in the zoo, Ludmila said. Them, Su Ming was furious. Perhaps the greater one-horned rhinoceros is not as precious as the white rhinoceros, but to Su Ming, and even to China as a whole, the greater one-horned rhinoceros is of greater significance. A large part of the purpose of his trip to Baghdad was to focus on the 2 great one-horned rhinoceroses. Before he came, he had made up his mind that no matter how much money he spent, or even if it was deception, he must get rid of the 2 great one-horned rhinos. Bring back. Even director Song personally told him that if you can buy other animals, buy them. It doesn't matter if you can't buy them. But the 2 big one-horned rhinos must be brought back. Because the great one-horned rhinoceros, in addition to its alias Indian rhinoceros, also has another alias, Chinese rhinoceros. Chinese rhinoceros is a general term that refers to 3 species of rhinoceros that live in China, of which the greater one-horned rhinoceros is the largest. Tragically, the Chinese rhinoceros has become extinct in China itself. Chinese people all have a feeling that rhinos are not abundant in China and that rhinos are imported species. In fact, this is not the case. China used to be the country with the most rhinos in the world. According to records, as early as the Yin and Shang dynasties, rhinos were widely distributed throughout China, and there were even large groups of rhinos in the Central Plains and Zhanghui areas. At that time, it was extremely normal to encounter rhinos in the wild, and it was very normal to encounter rabbits in the mountains today. Almost the same, maybe the probability is even higher. Since ancient times, rhinoceros has been a treasure, its meat can be used for food, and its horns are sharp weapons. During the period when metallurgy was underdeveloped, rhinoceros skin was the best armor, which could withstand attacks from knives, arrows, and other weapons. It was an excellent choice for making shields, the finest material for armor. Wu Gexi was beaten by a rhinoceros, and his car was in the wrong position. He was caught in close combat. During the spring and autumn period and the Warring States period, there were many rhinoceros in the Yangtze River Valley. Rhino hide armor was even a standard issue for soldiers of the state of Wu. All the gold armor in the city was nothing. At the peak of the state of Wu, 100,000 Wu soldiers were covered in rhinoceros armor. That was considered to be truly piled up with gold. Of troops, Emperor Taizong of the Tang dynasty liked to raise rhinos very much. Unfortunately, the level of raising rhinos was so poor that one of them died and a lot of money was wasted. Wei Zheng told Lao Li that as a king, you must understand your strengths and weaknesses. In terms of governing the country, you are the best emperor in history, but your skills in raising rhinos are too bad, so you should focus on your strengths, governing the country, instead of raising cattle. Wei Zheng's criticism was so pleasant. Old Li laughed and said that you are so right. I should just be a good emperor quietly and send all the rhinos back to their place of origin and release them. Several emperors of the northern Song dynasty also liked to raise rhinos, elephants, and other large animals. There are records that the animal trainers in the palace at that time could make dozens of rhinos and elephants line up and walk in front of the emperor one by one to salute. The scene was quite spectacular. It was not until the Ming dynasty that rhinos began to decline in large areas. By the end of the Qing dynasty, only sporadic rhinos appeared in Yunnan across the country. Rhinoceros became truly extinct in China only after the Republic of China. The heart has a clear connection, the rhinoceros looks at the moon. These are ancient Chinese poems derived from rhinoceros. China was once the largest place where rhinos grew in the world. However, in modern times, no rhino has been found anymore, which is sad. Therefore, Su Ming must take these two Chinese rhinos back. The dispute in the zoo was still going on. The group of soldiers all carried guns and surrounded the zoo staff. The leading officer had a very fierce tone, and several people wearing zoo uniforms explained with horror on their faces. Are you too brave? Government troops dare to come to the National Zoo to snatch animals, Nangong Huang said in surprise. Zhao Yun was not surprised and said, it's just like the warlord period in our country. During the war, these soldiers had their heads stuck in their belts and fought hard for the government. In peacetime, the military discipline was poor, but the government would just turn a blind eye, close one eye. Perhaps it was the government's acquiescence. The Iraqi government had no money to pay for the military, so it just let these big soldiers cause chaos and let them find ways to make money on their own. Su Ming snorted and said to Adnan, go and ask them, what's going on, why are you trying to rob the rhinoceros? Adnan jumped out of the car and walked to the group of soldiers. He had just said a few words with a humble face when he was roughly pushed away by a big-headed soldier. He took a few steps back and fell on his butt. On the ground. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 470. Adnan stepped forward to negotiate, but his status as a government official had no effect at all. Instead, he was roughly pushed and fell to the ground. A group of Iraqi government soldiers also noticed the off-road vehicle parked not far away. About a squad of soldiers walked toward the armed off-road vehicle with guns in hand. If I go, you won't want to rob us too, right? Nangong Huang was a little dumbfounded. Ludmila sneered and pressed an additional button on the steering wheel. The roof of the off-road vehicle slowly moved back, revealing a heavy machine gun attached to it. The group of approaching soldiers originally had their guns pointed at the ground, but after the machine gun on the off-road vehicle appeared, they suddenly became nervous and raised their semi-automatic rifles, aiming at the off-road vehicle. In the direction, they formed a battle formation and slowly approached, with a leading guy shouting something loudly. What are you going to do? Su Ming was slightly startled. This little girl doesn't know what to do. The other party is government troops anyway, and they are in the city, so they may not be able to fight. The worst thing is to pay some money and buy the rhino from them, which is what I wanted to buy anyway. But she showed the barrel of the gun so blankly. Wasn't this Chikuakuo's provocation? There was probably a platoon of more than 20 soldiers in that group of soldiers, all of them armed with semi-automatic rifles. If there was a real fight, the one who would suffer would definitely be the one who suffered. Even if Mao Mei is possessed by Rambo, it is impossible to kill them all. As long as one or two escape, she will be wanted by the Iraqi government. Deportation will be the best outcome. The Chinese, the Americans behind Iraq, the Russian mercenaries, damn it, if these factors are mixed together, there may be a huge dispute between the East and the West. In just an instant, Su Ming's mind went through a surge of electricity, and he calculated the situation clearly. He grabbed Ludmila's hand, frowned and said, "Miss Ludmila, what am I paying you to do? Those who protect us are not here to cause trouble." Ludmila flicked her wrist and got rid of Su Ming's hand with a flexible movement. She snorted and said, "I am just here to protect your safety. This is Iraq. So what? In Iraq, we must have an Iraqi style." After Ludmila finished speaking, she flicked her long blonde hair and stood up from the car carelessly. Most of her body was exposed to the muzzle of the gun on the opposite side. She held down the heavy machine gun on the car with both hands, and the muzzle of the gun shot into the sky. Without saying a word, a string of bullets were shot out. The muzzle of the gun sprayed wildly, bullet casings flew, and the sound of gunshots was deafening. Nangong Huang was sitting under the machine gun, and bullet casings fell from the sky. The little koala on him quickly put his head in his hands and huddled into a ball to hide in his arms. A hot bullet case fell right into Nangong Huang's neck, making him tremble all over. Su Ming was shocked. Is Ludmila crazy? This guy is getting ready to fight? The strange thing is that after Ludmila shot into the air almost unreasonably, the soldiers on the opposite side did not make any counterattack. Instead, they braked suddenly and froze on the spot. A few smarter ones also made tactical rules. Action, hurriedly ducked to find cover to avoid. But no one fought back. Ludmila sneered, pulled out a flag from the back of the car, flicked it in the wind, and a Russian flag appeared in her hand. "People on the other side, listen, this is the Russian Moran International. Any act that dares to attack this car and its members will be regarded as a provocation against Russia and a declaration of war against the Moran International." Ludmila first said it loudly in Russian with a clear accent, and then repeated it in Arabic. After the Iraqi government troops on the opposite side saw this flag, they looked at me and I looked at you, and finally turned back to look at the leading officer who was still arguing with the zoo staff. You see, this is the style of Iraq. No one will take weaklings seriously here. Ludmila stood behind the machine gun, looking forward, and proudly said to Su Ming, "Awesome. So awesome." Su Ming made a thumbs-up gesture, "And I can pull off a tiger skin to make a big flag. Who doesn't have the flag?" He also found a Chinese flag from the car, fluttered it open, and inserted it next to the Russian flag on the front of the car. The two big flags were fluttering in the wind, one on the left and the other on the right. "People on the other side, listen up. I am here on behalf of China. Any attack on this flag will be regarded as a declaration of war against China's 80 million party members. Uncle Zhao, help me translate." Zhao Yun always had the posture of being unmoved among millions of soldiers. He was holding a thermos cup to drink water. He was choked by Su Ming and coughed hard several times, but he still translated. Ludmila's eyes almost rolled to the sky. Party member, in Russia, this is such a familiar, yet so unfamiliar word. This guy really dares to boast that a businessman who comes to buy animals dares to say that he represents 80 million party members. But having said that, she herself is the same. Regarding Russia's provocation and declaring war on Moran, it is also a lie. The two people looked at each other, showing sympathy for each other. This is great. The flags of two big eastern countries are planted on the car at the same time. Even if the Yankees come, they have to weigh it. Except for the is country 100 kilometers away, I am afraid that no soldier in the world dares to attack the car. Fire! The guns of a row of soldiers on the other side even subconsciously lowered their guns slightly, for fear of misfiring and hitting the two vehicles. After such a commotion, the officer leading the other team finally left the zoo staff behind and walked towards the side with the remaining dozen soldiers. Adnan followed behind with a trot, bypassed the officer with a smile on his face, and ran back to the car first. The officer leading the team was a thin man in his 30s with sharp eyes. He stopped 2 meters away from the off-road vehicle, saluted the car first, and then said a few encouraging words with a stern face. He asked us what we are doing here? Why do we interfere in their affairs? Adnan hurriedly translated. Ludmila didn't say anything this time. She sat down again with her legs crossed, shrugged, and looked at Suming, as if the next thing is up to you. Ask him why he wants a rhino, Suming asked. After communicating with the officer, Adnan said, he said this is an internal matter of the Iraqis themselves, and it has nothing to do with the Chinese and Russians. Suming nodded. What he said was right. This is an internal conflict among the Iraqi people, and it is not his turn to intervene. Tell him that if he wants to sell the rhinoceros for money, he can name a price and I will pay, Suming said. Oh, boss, these soldiers are greedy, Adnan hurriedly advised. Just translate it directly, Suming said, greed should have a price, as long as there is a price, everything will be easy. 80 million party members and Russian girls are the biggest bargaining chips. Unexpectedly, after hearing Adnan's words, the officer shook his head without hesitation and said a lot of excitedly. Boss, he said no matter how much money it is, they must take the 2 rhinoceroses away, Adnan said with a bitter face, and added in a low voice, this is not a matter of money, they need rhino horns for religious ceremonies and communicate with the gods of the tribe.